If you're looking to buy a 2-flat or any multifamily property in Chicago, you're in the right place. I know when I wanted to buy my first 2-flat, I did all the research I could on the internet to make sure that I knew everything. Within the first year of me owning a 2-flat, however, I realized that even with all that research, I really didn't know anything. If you're watching this video, you've probably heard about all the benefits of owning a 2-flat. You've heard about how if you own a 2-flat where you live in one unit and rent out the other, you can easily start to build wealth through the appreciation of the building, while the rental income you get from your tenants help pay off your mortgage. There is a lot that goes into owning a 2-flat, however, and there are some things I know now that if I knew in the beginning, it would have made my life a lot easier. So if you're looking to buy a 2-flat for the first time, stay tuned because I'm about to give you some quick tips that'll make your life a lot easier. Here are 5 things that I wish I knew when I first started out buying a 2-flat. The first thing I wish I knew, which might seem pretty obvious when you think about it, but it's definitely something I overlooked, was that any tenant that is in the building that you purchase automatically becomes your tenant. In other words, just because you buy the building, that doesn't mean that you can automatically just kick those tenants out because they weren't your tenants, they were the tenants of the previous owner. The tenant's rights actually come before the owner's rights. If you're looking to buy a 2-flat, for instance, where you want to live in one unit and rent out the other, you should make sure that at least one of those units is vacant so that you can move into the building. Don't assume that just because you're buying the building, you can automatically get one of those tenants to move out, because chances are it'll take a lot longer than you think. In Chicago, if the tenant is on a month-to-month lease, you have to give them at least a 60-day notice if you want them to vacate the property. If the tenant has stayed there over 3 years, you then have to give them a 120-day notice, so a 4-month notice pretty much. I learned this the hard way because when I bought a property that I planned on fixing up and renting it out, not only did I have to evict the previous tenant, I also had to evict the owner himself because after he sold me the property, he didn't leave. So take it from me, if you want to live in the property, make sure at least one of the units is vacant before you close on it. Tip number 2 that I wish I knew before I purchased a 2-flat was that the more amenities that you offer with your property, the more stuff you're going to be responsible for. Now, what do I mean by that? To use myself as an example, I consider myself a pretty nice guy. I try to do as much for my tenants as I can. So with that, I often offer my tenants a lot of stuff that other landlords or other owners didn't offer, such as I'll offer a free laundry with the washing machine and the dryer. I'll offer a free parking space, stuff like that. However, with real estate, especially when renting out property, no good deed goes unpunished. So, for example, with the washer and dryer that I offer as a free service, if that washer and dryer breaks down, you're responsible for repairing it. Not only are you responsible for repairing it, your tenants are going to want you to repair it immediately because once they have a washer and dryer, they've never heard of going to a laundromat and wouldn't dream of doing that again. So if you don't get on it and repair it immediately, you're going to end up with disgruntled tenants. The last thing you want is a disgruntled tenant. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not saying don't offer these extra amenities. What I am saying is if you are offering these extra amenities, make sure you're charging for them because you're responsible for repairing them if they go bad. Don't be a nice guy like me, otherwise you'll get a call at 9 p.m. saying my dryer doesn't work, how am I going to dry my clothes before I go to work tomorrow? You don't want that call. Speaking of being nice, the third thing that I wish I knew before I bought a 2-flat was that every few years, you really need to raise your rent, even if just a little bit. The reason you need to raise your rent is because your expenses are going to go up every year. That's just how it is with inflation and your property taxes that are rising every year, the rising cost of utilities. There's no getting around it. So if you're a nice person, you may not want to raise the rent on your tenants because, well, once again, you're trying to save them money. You're not trying to overcharge them. But as your expenses go up, if the rental income stays the same, eventually you aren't going to be able to afford the upkeep of the building, or you'll be paying for it out of your own pocket. If you wait too long to raise the rent, or if your tenant is used to paying rent from 10 years ago and the rental prices have pretty much doubled now, you're going to have a hard time raising that rent because your tenant is used to paying such low rent. And they also know that if they go somewhere else, their rent is going to double. So now, once again, you're going to end up with a disgruntled tenant who you're going to have a hard time getting out. So once again, I know this might be hard for some people, but at least every few years, you should raise your rent just a little bit, just to make sure that you're keeping up with the rising cost of repairs and utilities, or just inflation, period. Tip number 4 that I wish I knew before I bought a 2-flat was to make sure you do a background and a credit check on any tenant that you bring into the building, no matter how good of a story they tell you or how close you are to them. In the world of real estate, we have what we like to call professional tenants, and those are tenants who pretty much know their way around the law. So they know once they get into your property, they can pretty much just screw you over for the next few months and not pay rent while they have somewhere to stay. They might have the best sob story about how they're going through tough times, and if they can just move into your property, they promise on everything they love that they will pay your rent on time every month. If they aren't willing to do that, or they're giving you a lot of resistance to doing that, trust me, it's for a reason. There's something on that background check, or there's something on that credit check that they know will deter you from renting the property to them. So even if the tenant puts on an Academy Award-winning performance on why they shouldn't have to do a background check and why you should give them a chance and let them move into your property, do not fall for it. Always do a background and a credit check. It'll save you a lot of headaches in the long run. Tip number 5 on things I wish I knew before I bought a 2-flat was that you actually make your money on the 2-flat in the long term and not the short term. When buying a 2-flat, many people think that the rental income from buying a 2-flat is going to cover pretty much all of the mortgage, where in today's economy, that's just not the case. If you actually break down the numbers, which I did in a previous video, you'll see that it'll actually be cheaper for you to rent out a unit in the building. If you own the property, the money that you pay each month goes toward paying down your mortgage, which the more of your mortgage you pay off, the more equity you have in the building. And that's on top of the fact that most likely the building is going to be worth more in the future than it is now, which means your wealth is just going to keep piling up, piling up. However, this is a long-term investing strategy, so you have to own the property a few years before you really see big results. You aren't just going to get fast money just from monthly income. That's really not how a 2-flat is designed. It's more designed to help you build up equity and wealth for the long run. So if you're looking for a get-rich-quick scheme, a 2-flat might not be the route that you want to take. But if you want an easy way to build wealth over time while really not even thinking about it, a 2-flat is definitely the way to go.